It wasn't just the missing birthday cake, though that cruelty had become a regular part of my life. No, the real tipping point, the moment that shattered 40 years of silence, was the cookbook. Harold's cookbook, a record of every sweet, intimate detail of his love affair. Her love affair, not ours. Each page was filled with her favorite desserts, her preferred spices, and every meticulously handwritten note about Ruby's favorite icing. A love letter, written over decades right under my nose. That was the moment I knew. My marriage wasn't just falling apart, it had been built on a damn lie from the start. It all came to a head over a stupid orange cake. I had spent all day, like I always did, preparing for his birthday. Baking his favorite cake, making the house look perfect, setting out his favorite dishes. The years had softened me, made me patient. I was used to the routine, the birthday charade, but that day, when Harold came home, there was something different in the air. Something I couldn't place. When I went to pull the cake from the oven, my heart dropped. No cake. Gone. The damn orange cake was missing, half-eaten, crumbs scattered on the counter. And then I saw it. The cookbook. Harold's precious cookbook, the one he never let out of his sight. I opened it, flipping through the pages, expecting to find the same old recipes we'd used for years. But instead, there they were. Pages filled with Ruby's favorites. Not a word about me, not a whisper of the cakes we used to make together. Just Ruby. My fingers trembled as I turned page after page. It wasn't just that he'd written it down. It wasn't just the details. It was the love, the devotion buried in every line. Each swirl of icing, each spice he knew she liked. A love letter that wasn't even hidden, just right there for me to see, for her to see. And then it hit me. I wasn't just an afterthought in his life. I wasn't just a functionary, a woman who cooked and cleaned and made sure he had everything he wanted. No, I was a ghost in my own marriage. A shadow who didn't even get a place in the stories he wrote. All these years, he had been living with her in his mind, and I'd been playing the role of the invisible wife. Lauren, my daughter, walked into the kitchen then, a look of mild surprise on her face. "Mom, what's wrong?" I stared at her, the woman who had always known how to smile and nod, to pretend everything was okay. But this time I couldn't. "Where's the damn cake, Lauren?" I said, my voice low but carrying the weight of everything I had kept silent for so long. Lauren hesitated. "It's gone," she said. "Dad wanted it for himself. He's been eating it already." But that wasn't the answer, not the real one. The truth was buried deeper than the frosting on that cake. "You knew," I said, and she flinched. "You've known for years." Her face tightened and she said nothing, but the guilt in her eyes spoke volumes. Harold had always been clever about keeping up appearances, perfectly polished, perfectly staged. But as I stood there in that kitchen, surrounded by his lies, the rot beneath our polished life became clear. The cake was just a symbol, a petty reminder of everything I'd given up. All those years, thinking I was needed, thinking I was seen, only to find out I was just the fool who fed his needs while he fed hers. I wasn't his wife anymore. Not really. And Lauren wasn't going to save him from what was coming next. I wasn't going to stay silent, not anymore. This house, the one Harold and I built together, or so I thought, is spotless. Every corner and every piece of furniture meticulously maintained by my own hands. And yet, standing here, all I feel is emptiness. The soft amber light from the expensive fixtures Harold insisted on glows over the carefully arranged details, casting a warmth that feels strangely, chillingly hollow. This year's birthday, or rather this staged birthday, feels different. My daughter Lauren has recently gained quite a following on social media. She's been creating a series of videos called The Ideal Family Life, always playing the role of the doting, thoughtful daughter, capturing heartwarming moments of familial love for the camera. It's all perfectly curated, perfectly false. I walked over to the dining table and looked at the dishes they'd prepared. Sizzling roast meats, glistening with fat, lobsters drenched in heavy, fiery spices, beef stewed in a chili sauce so pungent it made my eyes water just looking at it. The only thing that seemed remotely light was a shrimp dish, but it was buried under a thick, suffocating coat of garlic butter. My smile froze, then slowly melted away. I gave birth to Lauren when I was 35, considered a late pregnancy even back then. Harold's an only child, and from the start, his parents made it clear they were hoping for a boy. When Lauren was born, they remained polite, outwardly, but there was always a quiet air of disappointment, a subtle chill whenever they looked at her, then at me. Back then, I was physically exhausted after giving birth, but there was no proper care, no ideal family life being filmed. No one seemed to care whether I was getting enough nutrition. Even the most basic medical attention felt like an afterthought. I still remember those bleak days, chewing stale bread and overly sweet canned juice because it was all I could stomach, all that was offered. My appetite tanked, and that's when my teeth started to weaken, to betray me. By the time I turned 60, I had no choice but to wear a full set of dentures. A few years ago, I heard dental implants had become more advanced. I considered getting them, fantasized about tasting food properly again. But the cost held me back, nearly $4,000 per tooth. It just didn't seem worth it, not when there were always other, more important expenses. And what did Harold say at the time, with that dismissive wave of his hand? "Sylvia, you really want to shove those metal pieces in your mouth? That's disgusting. Besides, your teeth are messed up because you didn't take care of them. Look at me. I'm 2 years older and I can still eat anything." No thought to my difficult pregnancy, my postpartum neglect. Just blame. Lauren had chimed in, ever her father's echo. "Mum, dentures are so much more convenient at your age. Why waste money? Better to save it for Noah's college fund." Back then, fool that I was, I convinced myself they had a point. Maybe at my age, it really was better to think about the next generation. Eating softer food wasn't the end of the world, but these past few years, even the dentures have started to feel like a struggle. They slip, they pinch. I have to nibble my way through a simple sandwich, bite by cautious, unsatisfying bite. Looking at the heavy, spice-laden, tough-to-chew dishes on the table now, a cold wave of disquiet washed over me. Was Lauren just being thoughtless, conveniently forgetting I can't chew, let alone digest, half of this food? Or was it something worse? That quiet, insidious realization that no one in this family has ever truly cared about what I like to eat or what I'm even able to eat. I was just a mouth to feed, and an uncomplaining one at that. Lauren was the first to explode, her carefully cultivated, loving daughter persona vanishing like smoke. Her voice became sharp, scolding, like she was reprimanding a petulant, misbehaving child, or a dog that had soiled the carpet. "Mom, can you stop being so unreasonable? This shoot is important to me. My subscribers have been waiting for this heartwarming birthday video. Why are you deliberately making a scene now? You're ruining everything." Daniel, emboldened by Lauren, quickly chimed in, his voice gaining a new, unpleasant confidence. "Yeah, Sylvia. Mom, Lauren's been planning this project for weeks. We've invested a lot of time and effort. Can't you just go along with it? It's only for a few minutes of filming, and now you've completely ruined the whole atmosphere. It's very selfish." Before I could even form a response to their accusations, Harold's expression darkened further, his face a mask of fury. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his voice thick with irritation and a lifetime of simmering resentment. "Why can't you be more like Ruby? She's so considerate, so understanding. She never makes a fuss, never complains. Not like you. You're just getting more difficult, more bitter with age." He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle, Noah flinch. His voice rose in anger, echoing through the suddenly silent house. "Could you, for once in your miserable life, think about Lauren? She's working non-stop, juggling a career and a child, and still took time out of her incredibly busy schedule to come home and cook for you. Instead of being grateful, you nitpick everything. You can't help, fine, we're used to that. But do you have to stir up drama in your own house? Do you really think this is how a good mother a good wife behaves. I stared at her, unmoving. Inside, I felt nothing but an eerie, echoing stillness, like a lake gone dead in the depths of winter. But she wasn't done. Oh no, the venom was still flowing. "You're always throwing shade at Aunt Ruby," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "Always sulking, always finding fault. Maybe if you spent less time sneering and more time learning how to be a graceful, appreciative woman like her, things would be different. Maybe Dad would actually want to be around you." Noah, who had been cowering in the corner of the couch, his cartoon long forgotten, nervously piped up, his small voice trembling. I don't like Grandma anymore. Grandma Ruby never yells. Sylvia Grandma is mean." He used my first name, just like Harold did when he was truly angry with me. My breath caught. That innocent, parroted comment dragged me straight back in time, decades ago, when Lauren was just a little girl, and Ruby had, not for the first time, reappeared in our lives, a smiling, sympathetic predator. One afternoon, Lauren, all of 5 years old, had refused to let me do her hair, running instead to cling to Ruby's leg, pouting, "Bad mommy, I hate you. I want Aunt Ruby to be my mommy. She's pretty and sweet, and she gives me candy. Way better than you." Back then, I brushed it off as a child's thoughtless, cruel remark. Children say things. But here we are, all these years later, and my own daughter is still standing firmly by Ruby's side, echoing the same sentiments. Even my grandson, my own flesh and blood, has been turned, taught to see me as the villain, and Ruby as the saint. Ruby, this woman, who has always haunted the shadowy edges of my marriage, never needed to fight for anything. She simply embedded herself, quietly, insidiously, unraveling everything I tried to build, everything I thought was mine. She never raised her voice, never made demands, yet she managed to win over Harold's generosity, Lauren's childish affection, and seemingly everyone else's sympathy with her performance of gentle victimhood. And somehow, through it all, I was the one painted as difficult, bitter, cold, ungrateful. But now, standing there, weathering their combined storm of accusations, I saw it clearly, maybe for the first time, without the fog of hope or duty obscuring my vision. The problem was never truly me. It was that they never truly saw me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not even as a human being with her own feelings and needs. I was a fixture, a function, a convenience. Images flashed through my mind in a cruel, relentless montage. Harold's 50th birthday, a lavish dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town, him sipping fine wine, cutting into prime steak and lobster, Ruby seated subtly beside him, an honored guest. My 50th birthday, a quiet dinner at home, a cake I baked myself because Harold forgot, and Lauren was too busy. Lauren's wedding. I planned everything by hand, ran myself ragged, making sure every detail was perfect, from the flowers to the catering. Yet, in her tearful wedding speech, the person she thanked most effusively, the one she called her second mother and guiding star, was Ruby. When I suggested buying a practical, durable fabric couch for the living room, a place where a family actually lives, they called it a waste of money, dowdy, and old-fashioned. But when Harold gifted Ruby an entire antique dining set for her, charming little cottage, a gift worth thousands, he didn't hesitate for a second. He'd beamed with pride. All these memories, these slights, these profound betrayals pierced me like shards of glass, piecing together a bitter, undeniable truth. I was never more than a background prop in their lives, expected to give, to serve, to be silent, to absorb their casual cruelties, never to be cherished, never to be truly seen, never to have a voice. I looked down at my wrinkled hands, hands that had cooked thousands of meals, cleaned endless messes, offered comfort that was rarely reciprocated. But strangely, I felt calm. Lighter than I had in years. The rage had burned out, leaving behind a cold, hard certainty. I finally knew. I knew I didn't want to live like this anymore. I couldn't. Harold's face, already pale with shock from my divorce announcement, turned a ghastly shade of grey. His eyes, wide and horrified, were fixed on the cookbook as if it were a venomous snake coiled on the table. Lauren stared at the book, then at her father, then back at the book, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning, sickening realization. It was clearly the first time she'd ever seen it, or even suspected its existence. The Aunt Ruby she idolized, the second mother, was perhaps not the saint she'd imagined. I zipped the suitcase shut with a decisive tug. I stood up, took one last, sweeping look around this room, this house, from hopeful newlyweds to harried parents, from moments of laughter, so few in retrospect, to long stretches of icy silence. This house held countless memories. But now, I didn't want to take any of it with me, not even the good ones, because they were all tainted by the lie that underpinned them. I grabbed the suitcase, its weight surprisingly manageable, and walked towards the front door, my steps firm, my resolve unshakable. I didn't bother to look back. Behind me I heard Lauren shout, her voice shrill with panic. "Mom! Mom! Wait! Are you really leaving? Where are you going? Don't do this!" Harold's voice followed, no longer angry, but tinged with a desperate, unfamiliar panic. Sylvia, stop. Don't be impulsive. You're too old for this kind of drama. Where would you even go? You have nowhere to go. Come back, let's talk about this." I stopped at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob. I turned around slowly, my eyes clear and steady, cutting right through their frantic, self-serving pleas. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, almost serene, and crystal clear. "Where will I go, Harold?" I repeated his question softly. "I'm going to live my own life, a life without you, a life without lies." I returned to my mother's old house, a small, forgotten cottage on the other side of town. The moment I stepped inside, the faint, comforting scent of aged wood and dried lavender greeted me. Familiar, grounding. The place wasn't big, it wasn't grand, but it was quiet, steady. It felt safer, warmer, more genuinely mine than the grand, empty house I'd spent 40 suffocating years in. There were no luxury furnishings here, no gleaming surfaces reflecting staged smiles, no one I needed to tiptoe around, no one whose approval I needed to desperately seek. This, finally, was mine. My refuge, my peace. When I first arrived at my mother's old house, I felt utterly drained, as if something vital inside me had been hollowed out. I was so exhausted, I could barely lift my feet over the threshold. The house had been vacant for years, ever since Mom passed, and the air carried a faint, musty smell of disuse and gentle decay. I used to imagine this place, with its little garden, would one day be my peaceful retreat in old age, a place to read and knit. I never thought I'd come back like this, a refugee from a collapsed marriage. When I woke again, pale morning sunlight was slanting gently across the room. The house, familiar yet strange after so many years, sat in complete, blissful silence. Outside, light and shadow danced on the window pane, casting a soft, wavering glow onto a worn, silver-plated photo frame on the little bedside table. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the tarnished silver. I stared at the faded picture inside, a young, hopeful me, a smiling, ambitious Harold taken on our honeymoon. A wave of complex emotion, not quite grief, not quite regret, swelled quietly in my chest. 40 years, a lifetime. How had it come to this? Harold and Ruby didn't wait long. 2 days later, just as I was beginning to feel a fragile sense of peace settle around me, a sharp, insistent knock sounded at the door, breaking the stillness of the afternoon. I had just finished folding the newly washed bed sheets and was heading to the kitchen to boil a kettle of water for tea. My heart clenched instantly. A heavy, sinking feeling told me whoever was on the other side of that door wasn't someone I wanted to see. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I sat down the mug in my hand, took a deep, fortifying breath, and walked to the door. Just as I'd feared, standing on the small, weathered porch was Harold, and next to him, her arm linked proprietarily through his, was Ruby. Harold wore his usual look of smug indifference, that carefully constructed air of a man in control, as if my dramatic escape was just some childish tantrum, a temporary inconvenience to be brushed aside so normal programming could resume. Ruby, her face a mask of delicate sympathy, her eyes artfully downcast, played the innocent, reluctant victim, as if this failed marriage, this entire catastrophe, had been solely my own doing, not the inevitable result of their joint, decades-long betrayal. The moment I saw them standing there together, so brazenly, on my mother's doorstep, my stomach twisted. Nausea, sharp and bitter, rose to my throat. I took another deep breath, forced myself to stand tall, my fingers gripping the doorframe to anchor my composure. Harold spoke first, in that same patronizing, dismissive tone he always used when he thought he was being reasonable, when he was about to tell me what to do. "All right, Sylvia, that's enough of this foolishness. You've made your point. Come on, pack your things. Let's go home. Lauren's video isn't even finished yet, you know. She's very upset. Do you have to tear the whole family apart over this misunderstanding?" His words, once so powerful, once capable of making me shrink, of making me doubt myself, now exploded into the quiet afternoon air, but carried no weight. They no longer had any hold over me. That old, ingrained instinct to shrink, to obey, to apologize for my own feelings. It was gone, vanished. I leaned against the doorframe, my voice steady and clear, surprisingly strong. "There is no home to go back to, Harold, and I've already filed for divorce. The papers were submitted online yesterday morning. My lawyer will be serving you formal notice by tomorrow." Harold's jaw dropped. His face, which had been arranged in lines of impatient authority, crumpled. Ruby's carefully composed expression stiffened, the soft, sympathetic curve of her lips faltering, just slightly, her eyes darting towards Harold with a flicker of something that might have been alarm. He was silent for a long moment, the anger in his face slowly giving way to a calculated softness, a false wheedling gentleness he probably thought could still win me back, could manipulate me one last time. His voice lowered, attempting a tone of pained reason. "Sylvia, can't we sit down and talk this through? Just us? For Lauren's sake? For Noah?" I stared at him, this man I had once loved beyond measure, now standing on my mother's doorstep like a stranger, a conman with a familiar face, stirring nothing in me but a quiet, resolute determination to be free. "No, Harold," I said, my voice calm and utterly final. "There's nothing left to talk about. My lawyer will be in touch." And then I closed the door. The soft, definitive click of the old lock engaging echoed in the suddenly quiet hallway, like a full stop at the end of a long, painful and exhausting sentence. I'd need work, a purpose, something of my own, something that wasn't tied to being Harold's wife or Lauren's mother. Maybe it was time to visit the local community center. I remembered seeing flyers for crafting programs, for volunteer opportunities. Grace suddenly came to mind, a gentle, warm woman who had once cared for my mother during her final, difficult days. She was soft-spoken, meticulous, and loved crochet and quilting with a quiet passion. We had chatted a few times back then, and she'd mentioned volunteering at a craft co-op downtown, even suggested, with a kind smile, that someone with my obvious skills in needlework could easily find work there, or even teach. At the time, I'd dismissed it. Harold wouldn't have approved of me working, but now, maybe it was time to give Grace a call. The first thing I did after the divorce was finalized, a surprisingly quick and clean process, thanks to Harold's desperation to avoid a messy public battle and Ruby's eagerness to legitimize her position, was schedule a full medical checkup. When I held that health report in my hands a week later, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The tension that had clutched my chest, my stomach for so long finally eased. My body, neglected and stressed for decades, was tired, but it was mine again, and my health, my future, was finally back in my own hands. I told myself, with a surge of quiet determination, this is where my life truly begins again. Not long after, I sold my mother's old house. It had once been the place I imagined growing old in, but it had served its purpose as my sanctuary, my launching pad. With the modest proceeds and my share of the marital assets, which, after Harold's recent investments, at Ruby's urging, were less than I'd hoped but enough, I purchased a small, bright two-bedroom condo in a quiet, well-maintained neighborhood called Fountain Hill Estates in the neighboring town. The apartment wasn't large, but it was sunny, with large windows overlooking a series of charming little fountains and tall, mature trees. For the first time in decades, life felt calm, structured, peaceful. Mine. After moving in, I began carefully, consciously, building my new routine, one small, deliberate detail at a time. I visited the local hiring center to find someone who could help with heavier cleaning and errands, and eventually met a young woman named Lila. From the moment we spoke, I liked her. She was sharp, cheerful, and incredibly efficient, always knowing the right thing to say, the right thing to do, without ever being overbearing or intrusive. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She quickly felt more like a thoughtful, kind companion who happened to lend a hand when I needed one. And I finally, joyfully, returned to something I had once loved deeply in my youth, something I had abandoned under the weight of marital duties and Harold's subtle derision, crochet and quilting. I joined the community center's craft workshops, initially just to ease myself back into the rhythm, to be around people with shared interests. But after the very first class, where I instinctively helped a struggling beginner with a complicated stitch, people began gathering around me, asking questions, admiring my technique, asking if I'd be willing to teach them. Their genuine enthusiasm took me by surprise, warming a part of me I thought had gone cold forever. Grace became my true partner in this unexpected venture. She had a surprising knack for logistics and business, a sharp mind behind her gentle demeanor. She helped me design a simple, elegant logo, set up an online shop on a popular crafting platform, and suggested we share our work and my story on social media. "Your journey is inspiring, Sylvia," she said. "People will connect with that." Together, we registered a small creative studio, knots and threads, fiber arts, and hand-spun beauty. It sounded so official, so real. We launched a weekly online series, a sort of virtual craft circle. We filmed short, simple tutorials, shared tips on choosing yarns and fabrics, and talked about life, about growth, about the healing power of making things with your own hands. Slowly, our online audience grew. A steady, loyal group, mostly women around my age, but younger ones too.
They sent messages, emails, saying they saw themselves in my stories, that our hands-on creativity had rekindled something they thought they'd lost or never had. This wasn't some grand empire, and it didn't need to be.
It was something that fed my spirit, something that made me feel useful, valued, and creatively fulfilled again.
This life, quiet, simple, honest, and entirely my own, felt richer, more vibrant, and more profoundly freeing than anything I had known before. In just a few short years, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined.
What started as tentatively teaching crochet and quilting classes at the community center grew into a full-fledged, thriving venture with Grace.
Through our brand, Knots and Threads, our handmade pieces and online tutorials began to develop a loyal, enthusiastic following. At first, we sold small batches of scarves, baby blankets, and quilts at weekend markets.
But soon, we were taking custom orders, participating in regional artisan fairs, and even receiving invitations to juried craft expos across the state.
Grace, with her calm efficiency, handled the brand management, the finances, and the promotional outreach, while I focused on design, content creation, and teaching, both in person and online.
Every week, we filmed a short tutorial video, sharing new techniques, fabric tips, or just bits of our everyday lives. I even started talking, a little at first, then more openly, about my journey of starting a business at 68, of finding a new life after a long chapter had closed. The audience's response surprised and humbled me. Women my age wrote in to say our stories, my story, had rekindled their passion for life, had given them courage to pursue their own forgotten dreams. Younger viewers called our slow-paced crafting aesthetic soothing and authentic, a rare kind of comfort in their fast-moving, digitally saturated world.
Lila worked tirelessly by my side, her youthful energy a constant source of joy and inspiration. Grace remained my most trusted partner, my calm anchor, my wise friend.
Together, we had built something real, something beautiful, something that mattered. Not because we were needed in the old constricting sense, but because we were truly seen, valued, and appreciated for who we were and what we offered. I had thought, by this stage in life, that I had finally found all the peace and freedom I needed. I believed the voices from my past, the hurts, the betrayals, had finally faded into a manageable silence.
But life, it seems, always has its own ideas, its own unpredictable rhythms. And the next turn of fate, the next echo from that shattered past, was already quietly, patiently, waiting in the wings.
It was 3 years after the divorce, 3 years into this new, fulfilling life. A quiet weekend afternoon.
I had just finished a particularly engaging live stream, demonstrating a complex Fair Isle knitting technique, and was preparing to brew a pot of strong black tea, my little reward. The doorbell rang.
I assumed it was Lila, perhaps forgetting her keys again. I smiled, heading for the door. But when I opened it, it wasn't Lila. It was Lauren. She looked nothing like the vibrant, confident, if often abrasive woman I remembered.
Her once long, flowing, carefully highlighted hair had been chopped into a blunt, uneven cut. Her face was drawn, her complexion sallow, her eyes dull with a profound, soul-deep exhaustion.
That confident, almost aggressive, headstrong presence she used to carry, the one that had always intimidated me slightly, had completely vanished. She looked broken.
She stepped inside before I could even speak and immediately, almost as if her legs could no longer support her, collapsed onto the comfortable hand-quilted armchair by the window. Her voice when she finally spoke was hoarse, trembling, almost a whisper. Mom, I can't do this anymore." Before I could say a word, before I could even process her sudden, shocking appearance, Lauren suddenly broke down.
Her sobs were raw, jagged, tearing through the peaceful quiet of my small living room, like glass shattering on tile. They were the cries of someone who had reached the absolute end of their rope. "Mom," she choked out between gasps, her face buried in her hands. "Please. Oh God, Mom, please. You have to come back. This family, our family, it's nothing without you. It's all fallen apart. Ruby's a fraud, Mom. A complete monster."
She's a gambling addict. That whole story about her son studying abroad, needing financial help, it was all a lie. He cut ties with her years ago, moved across the country to get away from her. We were wrong, Mom. So wrong. We were selfish and blind and horrible to you. I'm so sorry. I just want things to go back. Just the three of us. Dad, me, and you. Starting over. As she cried, as the painful, humiliating truth unraveled, a grim picture emerged. After I left, Harold, true to form, had wasted no time inviting Ruby to move into the house we had shared for 40 years. At first, Lauren said, everything seemed to fall into place for them.
Quiet dinners, cozy conversations by the fireplace, the illusion of a long-lost soulmate finally returning to heal the wounds that I had supposedly inflicted. The perfect next chapter in Harold's narrative. But the illusion, like most of Ruby's persona, didn't last. Ruby, it turned out, was nothing like the elegant, gentle, victimized woman she had so convincingly pretended to be for decades. Once she was securely installed, the mask began to slip, then fell away completely. She was idle, demanding, and impulsive. Her spending became lavish, constant, and utterly reckless.
Endless credit card swipes for designer clothes she wore once, extravagant purchases for the house that Harold could ill afford, indulgent shopping trips that emptied their joint accounts with alarming speed.
Harold, Lauren recounted tearfully, had initially convinced himself she simply wanted to enjoy life after years of supposed hardship, that he owed her this. But then the bills, the real bills, began to pour in like an unstoppable flood.
Ruby started meddling aggressively in Harold's finances, pressuring him to merge all their accounts, to give her full access, even encouraging him to dip into his already depleted retirement savings to invest in shady, high-risk opportunities her
So-called friends had recommended. She even persuaded a vulnerable, guilt-ridden Lauren to sell one of her small rental properties, insisting that family should always help family live comfortably. Then, Lauren said, things got darker. Ruby's moods became wildly unpredictable, cooing and affectionate one minute, screaming and throwing things the next.
One night, drunk and slurring her words, she had turned to Lauren, her eyes glittering with malice, and sneered, "Your mother, that cold fish, never deserved to marry Harold in the first place. He was always too good for her. I should have been his wife from the start." I listened, saying nothing, as Lauren poured out her story, her voice hoarse and barely holding together. When she finally paused, exhausted, I simply got up, went to the kitchen, and poured her a glass of water. She took it with a trembling hand. "My channel, it collapsed," she murmured, staring into the glass. "People stopped buying into my content."
They said my life felt fake, that everything was curated, that I wasn't authentic. Most of my followers left, brand deals disappeared, sponsorships were pulled. I tried to pivot, to rebrand, but I have no idea what I'm doing anymore.
"I keep trying to hold on to something, anything, but the harder I try, the deeper I sink. It's like drowning in mud." She paused, took a ragged breath, her eyes threatening to spill more tears. "Mike and we got divorced too."
He said I was unstable, that everything in my life was a mess, that he couldn't take the drama anymore. Now I'm raising Noah alone, and I'm barely holding it together, Mom. There was no anger left in me as I listened to her, only a quiet, complicated kind of calm, a distant sorrow for the mess she had made of her life, a mess born from her own choices, her own blindness.
She looked down again, her shoulders slumped. Dad's not doing well either. He's practically bedridden now, refuses most of his treatment. Most days he's just rambling. Nonsense.
But he keeps saying his last wish is to see you one more time. I didn't respond, I didn't agree, and I didn't refuse. I simply waited until she had finished the water, then gently, quietly, asked her to leave. That night, I sat with my thoughts for a long, long time. Not because there was any love left for Harold, not because I hoped for closure, or reconciliation, or even an apology that would mean anything, but because I knew, deep down, that if I didn't face this final, ugly chapter of the past head-on, I would never truly, completely be free of it. Eventually, a few days later, I went to the hospital. Standing at the doorway of the sterile, impersonal hospital room, I saw him.
The man who had once commanded boardrooms with an iron will, who had controlled every corner of our lives with his moods and pronouncements, now lay frail and sunken into the narrow hospital bed.
His once robust frame was diminished, his skin waxy and pale. His gaze was unfocused, his breath shallow. When his dull eyes finally found mine, something flickered in their depths. Recognition, perhaps. Regret, maybe.
Or maybe just a fading, confused remnant of what used to be. "Sylvia," he rasped, his lips trembling, his voice a mere whisper, almost lost in the beeping of the monitors beside his bed. "Sylvia, thank you. Thank you for coming."
I'm sorry, Sylvia. I regret it all. Everything. I said nothing. I simply stood there in the doorway, looking at him, this ghost of the man I had married, the father of my child, the architect of so much of my past pain.
Then, after a long, difficult silence, he asked, his voice barely audible, "Sylvia, if I'd brought you that orange cake, that day, would things have turned out differently?" I shook my head gently.
Not in forgiveness, not in anger. Just an acknowledgement of a truth that was far more complex, far deeper than a single missed birthday cake. He already knew the answer. It was never just about the cake. I turned then and walked out of the room.
I didn't look back. Outside the hospital, the sunlight was soft and golden. The scent of early summer grass, freshly cut from a nearby park, lingered in the warm air. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt truly light, unburdened, free. Harold's ending, his decline, didn't bring me the thrill of revenge I might have once craved in my darkest, most bitter moments. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, standing there on the hospital steps. Just a profound, quiet clarity.
He was simply paying the price, the inevitable price, for the choices he had made, for the life he had led, for the people he had hurt, for the trust he had betrayed. The cost of taking everything and everyone for granted. His finances, his health, his so-called devoted companion Ruby, all gone, steep prices indeed. And ironically, those were the very things he once thought I lacked, the very things he held over me, the very things I now held, quietly and securely, in abundance in my own life. I didn't need to gloat, I didn't need to strike back, I simply left him behind, where he belonged, in the past.